Hey, welcome to another episode of the War Journal podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Taylor Cavanaugh. I'm not sure if my viewers know who he is, and he's out there on YouTube and Instagram, and I suggest you take a look at his videos and familiarize yourself with what he's doing. Uh, I'm going to let Taylor introduce himself and talk a little about kind of his story, and then we'll jump into some questions that I have for him. And really would like to just learn more about what you're doing and why you're doing it. So, if you don't mind, give a little background on your time in the SEAL team and the French Foreign Legion and your transition to kind of what your journey is right now. And then I have some really cool questions I'd like to ask you.
James, I appreciate your time, man, and the invite, and really respect your path, brother. And everybody for watching, right? Time's valuable, so I appreciate everybody's time here. My path, my redemption arc, or just the journey, has been a unique one. Growing up in Southern California, my dad was a Marine. That's what brought us out here. We lived on an old Chinook base. It's now condos, but in Tustin area. And he was just in six and out. So, but we stayed in Southern California. So I was being raised in San Diego, sports, all that stuff. Fitness was a big piece. I was a former bodybuilder. Mom was an aerobics instructor and all that stuff. So that was pretty normal, right? Sports, activity, all that was just part of lifestyle. And during those formative years, I saw some SEALs training in the Bay, and that lit a fire under me. I always wanted to be a SEAL from about 7 years old. That got shelved a little bit, girls, partying, sports, all these different things. But I always knew I was going in the military. I was like, I want to be a SEAL, but military for sure. My grandfather was a captain in the Navy, Naval Academy graduate, and just pride for the military was big in my family. It was just something that I was exposed to at a very young age. Now, I'll go to college. I had stacked a lot of bad habits and did a lot of dumb shit, DUI, driving suspended, drunk in public, just knucklehead shit. But it was enough administrative battle to where when I wanted to get in the military, when that later was now, I graduated from University of California, Santa Cruz, I had to go to jail to get off probation. And so the judge was like, look, man, if you want to go in the military, we'll commute your probation, but you got to go to jail. So I gave me 6 months. It was given 4, served about 3 and some change in Santa Cruz County, got out, started my process in the recruiting process, was turned down by the Marines for tattoos, Army for my background, and the Navy, where I thought was going to be impossible, which was my dream job, so I didn't try there first, was the only ones that would take me. If I could pass all the SEAL screening tests and get given a contract. Other than that, I could like turd wrangler or something. I had a very limited job options. And that took me about 9 months. Made it through MAPS, did all this stuff. I did a lot of recommendation. I needed a lot of FaceTime with active duty SEALs, retired SEALs, guys who were in the Naval Special Warfare training pipeline motivator program they had at that time. But I was down at the Naval Amphibious Base every day, pretty much every day for 9 months. And so they gave me a contract, and I shipped into the Navy in February 2010 on a SEAL challenge contract and entered into that pipeline. And that's where my story into the military started.
So we only spoke shortly, briefly, and that was a little while ago. And I told you my opinions and beliefs on SEALs. I worked with them when I was in the Special Forces community. I was assigned to a SEAL team. So I was a little jaded. And then after listening to your story, kind of softened me a little about that. Have some really funny stories about my time in the SEAL team. But I understand, what you did, your tours in the teams, and then kind of why you got out. I'd like you to talk a little more about your departure from the SEAL teams, and because I really don't want to talk about the team stuff. That's really not important to a lot of people. What really is more important is that transition from the SEAL teams, and really when you were in this dark period in your life. And I think that is what I related to when I watched that long video of yours. and understanding where I was and where I am in my life and where other people are at that dark period. I really want you to kind of expand upon that, because in the video you talked about it, dealing with the drugs, dealing with the, being the CEO and the cannabis stuff and investors, but talk about the darkness, because I think that's what people really want to understand. And you have, I would say opportunities and wealth and women and all of these things, but the darkness that was there.
Yeah. So after 7 years, I had put the final nail in my coffin in the military and failed a steroid. That was the final straw. I had drawn a lot of heat on myself, and so now I was out. Right now I was out. That my whole identity was being SEAL. So now I figured, well, I'm just going to not even address that. Me losing everything, my whole dream, and just lock on to this next thing and go 1,000 miles an hour. And in doing that, I was taking Adderall, Xanax, smoking weed, alcohol to take the edge off, right? And then a year later, I stacked on an opiate habit. This was every day. And was still achieving some measures of success professionally. But the chaos, and I guess we'll get into this part, is I just shelved and just buried, a whole, and didn't really address why it had happened. That was the real piece, was the self-worth piece and the good daily disciplines that I had begun to lose. And the chaos. And I could at least lie to myself about the chaos I was in, because I call it disciplined-ish. I was still going to the gym. I was still showing up at work. I was still successful, but not as good as I could have been. And that's the real piece for people to be understanding, is you don't have to be pushing grandmas in the street to stack karmic debt. You could just be not living your best life and your best self. And that anxiety, if you're feeling anxiety, that's a sign you're off the path. Like flow state living, aligned living, you're not going to be experiencing anxiety and friction and unmanageable pieces, or a lot of relationship issues. And all these things were happening to me, to speak to James about that dark side specifically. And the world kept closing in on me and closing in on me and closing in on me. And the pressure got more, and the momentum got heavier, and the spending habits were worse. And the fights were bigger, and all the friction was more. And that was the dark piece. And when it all came crashing down, I had pretty much OD'd on some fentanyl and went face down on a table and split my face open. It was everything had fallen apart in that moment. Right, all the wrong people knew. The cat was out of the bag, and I lost everything. I lost everything. I lost the job, lost the girl, lost the house, lost my whole shell identity that I had, this new identity I had created. And I found myself in a truck, homeless, with a sawed-off shotgun next to me, ready to kill myself, thinking about it. Well, and not sad. And that was the weird part, which was I knew it was dangerous. I was very matter of fact about it. Not crying, not sad, not emotional, just really thinking about the logistics of this thing, right? And what my current reality was. And I sat in my truck for about 3 days, and I was in Hawaii at this time on the Big Island, like rural jungle, where I had just parked and pretty much ran out of gas, had no money. It was a low point, man. And it was in time, people who believe in God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, man. I had that moment of clarity where it was, hey, listen, motherfucker, listen. Stop thinking about yourself for 1 second. If you played back your self-talk right now, you'd be disgusted. It was a lot of me, I, a lot of sad, but really, it was all my fault. And that was the piece where I was like, it was all my fault. In this dark moment, suicidal, in this dark moment, that's when I had that feeling of, look, if you got one more push in you. What had built you up, and I was tired, right? That was the feeling. I was just tired of trying, James. That was where I was at. And anybody who's watching this or is in that point, man, where you're just tired, this is the moment. Really get honest, bro. You're not tired. You just need to identify that next goal. And that's what I did, and I said it on the French Foreign Legion, and I was like, well, if I'm going to die, I'll at least do it with my boots on. Maybe they'll deploy me or whatever, but I'm not going to go up on my own hand, and I'm going to push through another crucible and see what happens. And that was the moment I made that call.
Yeah, there's two things I want to kind of touch on or ask you about. When I was at the SEAL team, I understood, I first came out of, recon. I was in Desert Storm. I got out. And then my first tour in the Navy was at a SEAL team in Little Creek. And, I was a little older, a little more seasoned. I had done a combat tour, I had deployed. And I understood, especially with the younger guys, the identity, that identity of being a SEAL and going through buds and, after your probation and now you're a SEAL and you're part of the teams, and how much it took on their life. And when I listened to your, interview talking about the things you did and looking to go to Baghdad, looking to do this, and then all of a sudden you're out and your identity is stripped away and you really don't have purpose. And talking about what you're talking about is now you have no identity, or your identity stripped away. You're lacking clarity on your purpose, and you're really in a dark period. And now you push through. And when I watched, the interview you did, that fear and paralysis, that really kind of struck home with me, because I did a previous podcast where I said fear will paralyze you and prevent you from accomplishing great things. So now you're in that dark period, you have that epiphany. Is that epiphany because you're so dark, or is it because you actually did have some feeling of a higher presence, God or something? If you can kind of elaborate on that for me, because that's what I'm really curious about. What was that thing that made you go, I got to go join the French Foreign Legion? Was it God? Was it that you were just so, dark period and that was your only option?
It's my personal belief that, and I've always had an understanding and knowing that there was a guiding force in my life. And even in a lot of my dark moments in jail and like a lot of stressful moments, man, I never doubted my faith for being on this divine path. And so, or at least being guided and protected in some particular way. And I didn't understand why I would go through things, but it was always like, okay, well, if this is the path, then let me see how I can make the best of this. And at that moment, I felt like I had another story to write. Like I could pull myself. I didn't know where it would lead. I just knew that I needed to pick up the pen and start writing my story. And yes, I did feel like I had a little bit of a divine push, because it wasn't all me. I don't think any of the power or some great thought, or like that I'm particularly motivated. I don't think that. I just think that I was put in a very position to where I was forced to make that choice. Right? I at least in my head, I had no other options. To answer your question directly, I had that proverbial corner I had been painted into. I was as close to the red. I knew I couldn't just get a job and just give up, man. I felt like it was giving up if I was just going to be like, well, I'm just stay here and see if I can make it work. That wasn't in my soul. I felt like I had more. I felt like I had more to give. And I also still wanted to serve. I didn't really feel like my time was up, at least in the military, because I hadn't got out on my own accord. So going back in, man, yes, and the purpose but this was also a piece, which was potentially part of my character flaw, was I needed that next identity. I needed that next label. Right? What was the next big thing I could put that Band-Aid on me and then be protected by some institutional label? Right? I'm this. And I'm a French Foreign Legionnaire. I had never heard of a Navy SEAL doing it, so I was like, I'm going to be the only Navy SEAL Foreign Legionnaire. I'm going to do that. And that was maybe faulty, but it's what drove me in a lot of ways. And so that's what got me on that plane and at that gate of Fort Nogent.
Cool. Hey, so I'll just tell you that, I understand, looked at what you did when you were in the Legion, and I worked with the French Foreign Legion when I was in the Marines and when we did our deployment in Corsica. And I'll tell you, it was like the best and worst experience ever. Bunch of thieves. You couldn't leave your gear unsecured, or else it would be gone. It was a fun time. They ate well, they drank well, and they trained hard. But biggest bunch of thieves and criminals I've ever met in my life. But it was fun. I did some training in French Guiana, jungle
Yeah.
training. I remember the French Foreign Legion compound with a big boa constrictor that they used as a training exercise. But it was fun times, and I'm sure that they were fun for you. But at a point, your identity as a SEAL, is eroded. Your identity as a French Foreign Legionnaire is eroded, and you do some YouTube videos, and you start getting this other identity. You
Yeah.
have this idea, and I want to talk about that, and I want you to tell me how that kind of manifested, because I have some really, questions that I have for you, about your purpose and meaning and why you're doing it. But, tell me about that. Now, this transition, what caused the transition from Legionnaire to, life coach and someone who wants to help people?
So, man, James, I didn't realize you had that much FaceTime with the Foreign Legion. That's interesting. That's a unique experience. So you understand, it's like a very unique place that has its own friction points, right? It's got its cool points, but it's got its sticking points that are very challenging to deal with. So it was in that French Foreign Legion barracks room and processed through a couple deployments, and I really finally, dude, I felt like I had some karmic debt to burn off. For real. Like I felt like I had anxiety to build up, mistakes I had made, time I needed to heal, space between people and places. So for the first couple years, man, it was rough. I mean, I was in this foreign land. My French is terrible, still not great. And I was just no autonomy. I was like Apple, as I was talking to Marcus Luttrell the other day, and he's like, dude, the Foreign Legion's like apples and fucking cement. It's like two totally different cultures as far as autonomy is concerned. But it was what I needed, and also is what I earned. It was I always say, man, it was cleaning those toilets and getting yelled at and by some Russian dude in a French speaking French to you. I heard it. I was in that reality because that's exactly the reality I needed. And so I started down this philosophical approach because it was survival. It's what kept me sane. Like, what is this Romanian instructor here to teach me? Right. As he's, has me with a toothbrush and behind a toilet for 5 hours. So it was a baptism in humility, as I say, and it's what I needed. And it was in this process, right? I'm in this Foreign Legion barracks room a couple years in, where I started to build my body back up. But I also realized I wasn't happy still. I still had this peace. And that was when I realized I needed to start looking internally. There was nowhere else to go. I started looking at, it was actually a few years in, but when the Ukraine kicked off, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll go there or go contract in Africa. What's the next step? And I really realized it was like endless of just chasing the rabbit or something. And so I said, you know what? Let me reset my disciplines. Let me just start on this path. And so I really started stacking my daily disciplines better, being more mindful, being more conscious about how I think. And once I started reading literature that, hey, your thoughts matter, right? Your energy, your frequency matters. It's what you attract, universal laws, all these pieces, Greek philosophers, samurai philosophers. I started understanding, and I started seeing the patterns of how these people were living, successful people, right? Or people who had a unique minds, powerful minds. So I started to apply these things to my life, and then doing it on non-negotiably, right? Every day, and holding myself to a higher standard, not going to make poor choices like I would, man, not going to, hook up with that girl, and, things that I just always would do. I just stopped doing. I just told myself it's not benefiting me, it's hurting me. And I eliminating those things out of my life, started to feel better. Started to have good days every day. And it was, consistently for a long period of time. Started to feel, and I look back the couple years, and I go, wow, man, I was suicidal in my truck, and now I'm having good days every day. What an interesting path. It was just on the daily blueprint I was operating with, and it was simple: tracking food, being mindful, raising your consciousness. And that's I decided. I was like, well, what do I want to do next? I mean, I would love to teach people that path. If I was there and I could do it from to here, and I could be happy in a French Foreign Legion barracks room, shit, man, when I get out somewhere else, like, man, it's gonna be way better. So that was when I decided I could teach people how to do this. And I was looking at people online. I'm like, they don't have the story. Right? They can't do it like I can do it. I know I can do it better. And so that's when I put myself out there and told my story and the path, and it kind of took off.
That's it's interesting you said that, because one of my questions was going to be, and I told you my feelings on the Special Forces community and the SEALs, and I see, like Jocko out there, and I see David Goggins, and I see people like Nick Lavery out there, and they all believe that they have a unique story or tale, and some of them do. And, I did my due diligence on you to understand your story, and I believe it is a different path. But what separates you, from the other podcasters and other Special Forces community guys and other SEALs? Why is your story more important than theirs? And the other part of that is, why is some normal guy or normal woman or person who's never been in the military, how are they going to connect to that and resonate with it? Because on my little podcast journey, I've met, like you, a lot of people who have faced adversity in their lives that I faced some really shitty things in adversity, and then I look at them and I'm like, wow. And they didn't have the training, the discipline, and things that we got through training. So why is your story, powerful? Why, tell me and tell everyone why, we should listen to you, and why, your approach is going to work and help them.
Because my story is just I'm honest and authentic about all my fuck ups. And I think a lot of guys in a lot of the spaces seem untouchable, unrelatable. I know people can relate to my story. Like, I know people told you, Jocko, I got all the respect in the world for that guy. But he's tough to relate to because he's so locked on and has had such a stellar career that he's tough to relate to. Yeah. But he's got his market, right? But it's just a guy who's having drug problems is not going to relate to Jocko Willink. Just as simple as that. And that's feedback I get from people, why they talk to me and not somebody else. And I try to come at it, dude, I have made a ton of poor choices again and again and again. And sabotage is the theme of my life. And people understand self-sabotage. And that's why they identify with my story. Most of my story is not about, I don't talk about combat this, or that's not really what I get down. My whole line is off the field. And that's what people relate to, because that's people's lives. It doesn't interest me, operations and stuff. Personally, that's not where my lessons were learned. My lessons weren't even really, maybe what I did, it probably created who I am. It definitely morphed who I am as far as being in the military. But that's not how I identify. And that's definitely not where a lot of my lessons were learned. It was learned off the field, doing some of the wrong shit. And it was the redemption arc out of it. I didn't learn in the military either. I had to learn that by myself in some cold rooms with some honest self-reflection. And people understand that too. So the theme of my life is just life. It has nothing to do with the military. And that's why a lot of people choose to, I'm not saying my story's better. It's just different. And it's just a little bit different of a path that a lot of people I find identify with, because they understand values, they understand self-sabotage, they understand peaks and valleys and achieving things and then losing the discipline and breaking it down and having to build it back up. And that's the theme of my story.
Yeah. I don't know if you've watched a lot of my podcasts, but I've only talked in one podcast about my combat experience. And that was in Desert Storm. And what I talk about is these life lessons that I learned not only on the battlefield, but in life, going through a contentious divorce, custody trials, being at the darkest periods of my life. And my idea is what I learned, I want to, and this is, I think, a theme that I listened to, and it came out a couple times when I listened to you talk, is if I can help one person, if I can prevent them going through the challenges or find ways to deal with the challenges in their lives, it's a win. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of parallels between what you're doing and what I'm doing. I think our audiences may be a little different. But at the end of the day, that's why I wanted to talk to you. I believe that we are on a similar path trajectory, a little different in our approaches, and kind of which leads to my next question. I talked and I watched a little about how you have a blueprint, your plan, how you want to use that blueprint and plan, and how it worked for you. But it's not going to work for everyone. But tell me a little more about like the idea of the plan and the design and the blueprint and how you can help people and what your goal is on helping people.
Yeah. Well, I say the blueprint does work for everybody, because if people have no blueprint, that ain't doing shit. Right. And so, right. And it's like, and I'm not you need to fit the square peg round hole guy. I understand that there needs to be just people with different schedules. There's people with different jobs and this and that. So I understand that piece. But the blueprint is generally more mindful living. It's empowerment through action. It's correct wake up time. It's living deliberately. That is the blueprint. How that actually looks changes, and we tailor. And that's part of it. But it's better eating. It's more deliberate living. It's more conscious about how you are and treat people. And if you're not at a correct vibrational frequency, fix it. That is, and identifying goals, right? And making strategies to achieve them. That is the blueprint. And a lot of people are just winging it, man. They're shoving stuff in their face. They're waking up whenever they want, and they're wondering why they have anxiety. It's like, shit, I would have a ton of anxiety too, right? And it's because you're not aligned. You're not aligned. You're way off the path, and so your experience, anxiety is a state of punishment. It's a state of punishment for not living aligned. That's exactly what it is. And so when we get people on that aligned flow state jet stream, things start going a lot better.
It's interesting when I look at your life and what you've been through, and kind of reflect on mine. I see a lot of parallels, and I will tell you that there's no way in the world that in my darkest periods that I would have been able to listen to you or take a blueprint. I mean, it was, just enough to get by every day without, it was a struggle to wake up. It was a struggle to get by. It was a struggle to do anything. So what piece of advice would you give to people? Because you were in that situation. I've been in that situation, and it's hard to get out of it. How do you?
Yeah.
What's the first step? I mean, obviously I saw hit you up on Instagram, DM you, whatever. But what's that first step that you're going to talk to somebody who's really in that in that place where they have no hope and no motivation to do anything, and they don't have the discipline, and they don't have the wherewithal, or they don't have the finances? What's your message?
Yeah. And so reaching out to me is probably not the first step, right? And like to answer your question specifically, just honestly, it is moving quite literally in a lot of ways. It's get moving. Staying in the house, stagnant in a low vibrational state. I'm talking go walk outside for 5 minutes to get some sun. Start actioning, start resetting, getting up. Because I've been there, man, where you're walking through quicksand and it's like 1,000-pound leg trying to stand up, right, in the morning and find any type of motivation. I totally get it. The only way out is through. The only way. So you've got to start moving. Man, take a moment. Isolate for a little bit. Okay, right? And I'm not saying a long period of time. Get honest about where you're at and what brought you there. Get honest about how you're feeling. This is the first step. Don't deny it. Be honest about where you're at, what decisions, more importantly, what part you played in it to bring you to this state. Once you get honest and accept all those pieces, That is the you can start when you're tired of your own bullshit. That is the moment you can start making some changes. Then start moving, start hydrating. You don't need to be out there in a blueprint training, tracking your macros right away. That's not really what I'm getting, because that's probably a little too big a bite to take off. Start moving, go get some sunlight, get you a little bit of momentum. Man, go outside and walk 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. That's it. Sometimes that's all you need to where you can start opening up that optimistic lens again, to where you start to see, oh, you know what? There is this habit. And then, yes, reach out to somebody who can actually expedite and collapse the time horizon on your goals. That's what it is, right? You get some outside accountability, so it collapses the time horizon. You get to where you're trying to go faster, or you could just fumble fuck it for another 5 years, then maybe figure it out.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree. You know, when you're walking through hell, you only have one option: keep walking. Because if you just you stop, you're stuck in that position. You know, the other thing is I wanted to ask you. You know, we've seen your transition from SEAL to Legionnaire now to trying to help people. What's your identity? I mean, what's your identity now? And I wrote down a note and it said, you know, have you created the man you want to be right now, or where do you think that is in your evolution? And where do you see yourself?
Yeah. And I'll add one more thing to that last one. It's cut the vices, chop away the vices that are holding you back, right? In that low. But right now, man, my identity, right? I identify as a man that's trying to get better every day. That's how I identify with. And am I where I want to be? You know, evolved. I'll tell you what, I feel pretty damn good every day. I'm in a very clear state. I stay pretty positive. I'm happy about the choices I make. Things falling in place. Right, I have a fiance, baby on the way. Business is great. You know, relationships are good. Family's good. So I always say, if a man's right, his world will be right. That's how you know. If your world's not right, something's not right. So every kind of capacity, very, very good. And so now it is honed focus. I double down on the self-development. I double down on my disciplines. I double down on working with my clients. I try to give every bit of energy I can every day. I'm smoked by the end of the day in a positive way. And so this constant state of, and I'm not changing anything that worked for me in the barracks room to where I live on a golf course, right? In 1 year, less than a year, right? What I've been able to do in less than a year has been, it's a blessing, right? And I make no mistake about it. I see it exactly as that. So it's like, fuck Taylor Cavanaugh. It's not about me. I'm just a conduit. I'm simply a conduit of information who is going through some experiences, so I could be given a platform so I could actually share, man, that, man, it's okay to not be okay. It's not okay to stay there. Make some deliberate decisions. Success is subtractive. Start subtracting things that are holding you back, and then start holding yourself more accountable. So I hold myself to that same standard every day, right? So it's a constant battle, man. It's a constant battle. I'm not some perfect piece in glass, and I have to constantly check myself. I have to constantly check when I'm in a low vibrational state and I want to be angry or have a bad attitude, man. And that's because that's not who I want to be.
So here's something that I have struggled with in my life, and I want to get your perspective. Women have been the greatest source of happiness and joy in my life, and they've also been the greatest source of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, when you're young and you're immature, and, you know, you're like when you were at the teams and you're partying and you're hooking up, and it's a fun life. And how much influence or impact have women had on your life, your career, your troubles, and also your success now?
I mean, really, any trouble I'd ever had, like a secondary and tertiary effect of having a women there present, right? And I think most guys is that way. It's a lot of great men are taking, right? Marriage, divorce, all these things, right? Again, and a lot of guys I work with, that's where they're at. So I was very aware of that. And also, I wasn't raised in a family that there was a great example. A lot of turmoil, a lot of chaos, a lot of tension. So, and in my life, out of the teams, wasn't so much in the teams, but some of the trouble I had, definitely, I was on dates and things like that. So, but even out of the teams, right, that gap, well, I was like, dude, that was a nightmare. I wasn't my best self. So there was a lot of situation that, bro, I was at some of my lowest points of frustration, absolute chaos, and having your partner be somebody that is somebody you don't have to fight to get back to zero with all the time on this consistent rotation is paramount, because you cannot build anything great when you're fighting in the red to get back into the green all the time. It is impossible. Emotionally hemorrhaging energy every other week or more. Who knows? That is impossible. And so that was when I was, in this relationship, it was just a completely different situation. I'm blessed because I know how it can be, and I know how it is now. And it's pretty incredible to have somebody that supports you and that is in that same energetic frequency and understands the bigger picture and where everything's going. You got to be in sync with your woman, or it is just doomed for failure.
Yeah. So here's another one. It's not a softball question. This one's going to be tough. I see there's your personality, talking to you, watching your videos. There's this addictive personality. There's obsessive compulsive personalities, type A personality. I think a lot of that, special forces community. How are you managing your, because you did have addiction problems and drug problems, and how are you managing that? Like for me, I just don't drink. And if I do drink, I'll go out and I'll have one, because I know my personality is 100 or 0. And, once
Yeah.
1 turns to 5 turns to 20, and fortunately I've never really done drugs. My addictions were, cigarettes, tobacco, and alcohol, not so much alcohol, but how are you managing that? How's that? Is that a daily thing, or have you checked out the box and it doesn't bother you at all? Are you afraid that you're ever going to go down that path?
I would say, it was in my life when I had some honest reflection. The addiction piece, I've been addicted to one thing, and it was fentanyl. 1,000%. That was woven into my double helixes, like a physical addiction. The other things were habitual. I abused it. I abused things, right? And also, I'm very habitual in the sense that if I'm doing something, I just put it into my schedule, I'll do it every day. And so I have to be very cognizant. So I don't do anything negative every day. Like, I don't have any vices that I do every day. If we do drink, I'll have a beer with a team guy or something, but it's once every couple months, maybe something like that. It's pretty spaced out. And now, and I realized I never had a reason to not before. So I never like had a reason to not. And that was interesting. And now my reason is it takes me way off the path. Like, even at one time or something, it affects my ability to perform the next day because I'm so busy now. Also, that's the other thing, is idle hands. I don't have any time, so I don't give myself any free time. And so that's the other piece, is I just try to stay so busy, focused, and purpose, that I don't really have any pleasure seeking time. The time I do have is a couple hours a day, and I take it to go to the gym. That's literally the one window I have. And because and I'm not cured by it, right? That's the other piece I'm very aware of. If I have too much gap in time, man, my mind immediately goes to pleasure seeking. It's just how my mind goes. And obviously I hold myself to a higher standard. I think power is muscle. The more you exercise, you get a little better at it. And I just go, no, because I can play it out in my head now. Thank God. Maybe it's just age, or having been beaten down into submission so many times. And I don't want to fuck up what I have going on here. I've learned about self-sabotage, and this is self-sabotaging behavior. That is a piece that I make a very cognizant association with. I go, that's the devil pulling you in the wrong direction, man. Intrusive thoughts, whatever you want to call it, it's self-sabotaging behavior. If it's not helping me, it's hurting me. So it's a mantra, man. I try to just keep I have to stay active with it. To answer your question directly about it, James, I don't rest on my laurels about that at all, because I do have turn it up, cut it up, burn it all down fucking mindset that I have to keep at bay, man, for 1,000%.
No, I hear you. It's very similar for me because I can see myself once I start going down a path and I'm like, that's the wrong path. So what I really am also interested in is, understanding what your ultimate goal is now. I mean, I can see like what you've said and what you're putting out, but deep dark down, what do you want to do? I mean, what's your you talk about happiness and success and terms that most people do, but what's going to bring you this joy right now and happiness, and what do you see as success on your current path?
Man, it's amazing because I feel like I'm living in success right now. So I'm really happy with the steady growth, right? I have hundreds of clients. I'm busy every day. I get more every day. And I got a book coming out, ideally, right? Maybe we'll do a movie and stuff. That's just side stuff. But I feel like I'm living in my dream, man. I was in a Foreign Legion barracks room dreaming about living a life of my design, having a family, having being able to work in purpose and train when I want and have the full autonomy as I want. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So now it's just growth. I want to be the most massively successful motivational empowerment coach on the fucking planet. That's my goal. Right. And so I want more speaking engagements. I want this message out, man, because we see what's happening. And I don't want to have some delusion of grandeur. That's not what I'm thinking here. I thought about leaving the country, man, because I saw where it was going, and I decided, no, I'm going to stay in for this from the inside. We see the pendulum switching back. The accountability needs to come back. That focus on the hardworking man needs to come back. All of these good traditional values which built our country, we need to build them back. It starts with each individual man and woman deciding they want better, deciding that they're not victims, deciding that their reality is theirs to create. That's my whole mission. Empowerment rooted down to one word.
Yeah, I think obviously that's an awesome goal. And but I would say that you're going to be challenged with that. And the reason why is because of where our society is at. So you're fighting not only the battle to help individuals in their self, their journey or whatever, but you're fighting, societal currents that are like tsunamis in a way, and you have to deal with that. You know, I hope, and I also believe that the pendulum is swinging, but you know, I still kind of have my doubts. But I'm curious, you know, what is going to be like? And I didn't know you were putting out a book. If you can put out a pitch on that, but what is your, in the book? What's the message? What's the theme? What's the goal? Like, is it more than what we're talking about? Is it, kind of? If you have any insight on that.
Man, it goes into more of the Foreign Legion, goes into more of the characters, right? And also lessons to that capacity. Right? I don't touch too much on the SEAL teams, touch a little bit on the life, but most of it is the path and what I learned through the Foreign Legion. What I learned in that process of having everything stripped down, the characters I met there, right? All the experiences I had that are very unique in the Foreign Legion. And that baptism in humility, that washing clean that I kind of came out with, of a very clear vision of who I wanted to be and what it required. Daily work, that self-worth building every day. And I know the current's strong. Good thing I'm a good fucking swimmer, right?
Yeah.
I see what I'm seeing, right? I see what I'm seeing out here. And we only have one choice, right? Surrender or fight. That's it. And I know which one I'm always going to choose. And so, man, I'll work on it till I stack, 100 clients every single month with me, and that get better, right? And I see people's lives changing, marriages changing. It's 100, 100, 100, 100, and we'll get that to thousands and millions. And that's all it takes to set the ripple effect. I'm all about ripple effect and compound effects. And so I'll just keep chopping the wood, man. Many strokes, great oaks, as Benjamin Franklin said. And so that's all I'm about that shopping with, man, every day. And I know it's not gonna be easy because the currents, man, it's incorrect philosophy that's pushing back against us. And sooner or later the truth comes out. And so I like to be on that right side.
I wish that we could just have a fun podcast trading war stories about my time in the SEALs, your time there, my time training with the French Foreign Legion. I, I, I would imagine that we have very similar experiences. I can tell you as an ensign at a SEAL team and doing the things I did as a former recon Marine, the things I got away with, the ORE, stuff like that. I wish we could, you know, have a podcast someday just talking about the fun shit so people can understand some of those experiences and how they transcend and how they make an imprint on you and your identity and kind of drive you to your path. But that's for another day. What I really want to do is, what I want to do is kind of put out a challenge to you. Our messages are similar, our approaches are far different. I don't ever want to be, in the limelight. I want to just talk about my podcast, help people, and in my way. But I want to be able to help you because I think you do have the personality to do that. And I think that your message and your goal is authentic and genuine. So that's why I wanted to do the podcast, and really talk to you down to earth. What can I do to help you? And how can I help you achieve your goals?
Man, James, exactly what we're doing here, man. Right. I really appreciate your time, man, because I got a ton of respect for you and what you're doing and your message and what you've done. Right. And so, man, what we're doing here is you have your connections and your touch. If anybody needs to get some outside accountability or connect me with people that you think could, perpetuate the message and get it out there, I'm there, man. I'm here to facilitate and help also. And so that's how I view it, man. I view these things as collaboration, not competition. I like to approach my life. I think even in the special operations community, especially you see even on the social media, there's a lot of competition, bogarting. That's not how that's scarcity mindset. I look at everything as like abundance. That's just part of my training. Also, it's what I teach people. Abundance mindset. There's so many people that need help. There's so many ways to get the message out that, man, wherever we can plug and play, man, let's make it happen.
Oh, cool. I appreciate that. I mean, I experienced that too. I've reached out to some other veterans and some high profile guys, and they don't have time for me, which is really cool that you made time for me. And I'll bend over backwards to help you get your message out, and definitely want to collaborate in the future. If you need anything with as far as the book, happy to help. I published the book, so I know the challenges. I can put you in touch with people who might be able to help that. I do have a quid pro quo for you. I do have a manuscript I wrote, and it's 2 full seasons of a potential miniseries. And if you have anybody that you think would be interested in it, and each episode has a life theme. Talking. I'd love to collaborate with you on that. We're both a little long in the tooth, age-wise, so we can't play the leading character in it. But if you could do anything to support that, I'd appreciate it. And like I said, I'll do everything I can to make sure that my network knows about what you're doing because I truly believe it's important. I know personally I've gotten the same calls that you have where, I was about to off myself. I read your book and it changed my mind. So that is an amazing thing. And I know you experienced it. So I'm on board. I'll help you out, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I'm actually going to a red carpet event on the 21st, man, with some producers and stuff. So we're getting tied in pretty quick here, man. So I'll let you know.
All right. I appreciate it. And thanks for your time. And like I said, I'll push this out. I'll to everybody in my network. And I really want to help you, get your message out there. I think it's a powerful one that a lot of people need in their lives right now because some shitty things going on in our society and people don't have good alternatives. And I think that you'll be able to help them out.
Hey, seriously, Thank you, Jay. I sincerely appreciate your time. And thank you,
No
everybody, for
worries.
watching.